A prime minister goes for a swim and vanishes forever. An inventor disappears from a locked train car. A pilot's jet merges with a UFO on radar and is never seen again. These aren't plot holes in a bad movie. These are real historical events where famous people simply checked out of reality, leaving behind nothing but questions. 1. Being the leader of a nation usually means you can't even go to the bathroom without a security detail. Yet, in 1967, Australian Prime Minister Harold Holt managed to vanish entirely. He went for a swim at Cheviot Beach, a place notorious for rip currents so vicious they could probably steal your wallet. Witnesses saw him wade into the water, and then he was just gone. An absolutely massive search operation, one of the largest in Australian history, found nothing. Not a trace? The official verdict was accidental drowning, but come on, that's just boring. The public imagination cooked up far better stories. Was it suicide? An assassination? The absolute gold medal theory is that Holt was a secret communist spy, and a Chinese submarine surfaced just long enough to scoop him up. It's a plot straight out of a terrible spy movie, but it's infinitely more entertaining than Man Swims Badly. 2. Thomas Boston. Corbett is a historical character so bizarre he feels fictional. Famed for being the soldier who shot and killed Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth, his backstory is even wilder. He was a religious fanatic so terrified of prostitutes that he once performed self-castration with a pair of scissors to remain pure. After killing Booth, his fame only amplified his paranoia. He became erratic, threatening people and eventually being declared insane and locked in an asylum. But Corbett wasn't one for padded walls. He managed to escape, somehow acquired a pony, and galloped off into the Kansas horizon. He was never, ever seen again. Think about that. The man who ended one of the biggest manhunts in American history concluded his own life story by simply riding a small horse into total anonymity. It's a perfectly absurd ending. 3. If you're going to commit a crime and disappear, D.B. Cooper wrote the masterclass. In 1971, this impeccably dressed anonymous man hijacked a Boeing 727. He didn't scream or make a scene. He calmly ordered a bourbon and soda and passed a note to the stewardess explaining the bomb in his briefcase. He demanded $200,000 and 4 parachutes, and once his demands were met, he had the plane take off again. Then, in the dead of night, during a thunderstorm, somewhere over the vast, unforgiving forests of the Pacific Northwest, he jumped out of the back of a commercial airliner with a bag full of cash. He became an instant legend. The FBI chased his ghost for decades, finding only a small bundle of his money years later, which only deepened the mystery. He didn't just escape. He exited reality with a level of style that has never been matched. 4. You have to appreciate it when the universe provides a ridiculously obvious clue. Musician Jim Sullivan released a strange, lonely folk album in 1969 called UFO. The lyrics are all about driving into the desert, leaving your body behind, and being taken up by aliens. Fast forward to 1975. Jim Sullivan is driving his VW Beetle through the New Mexico desert when he vanishes. His car was found abandoned on a remote dirt road. Inside were his wallet, his guitar, his clothes, and a box of his unsold UFO records. But of Jim, there was no sign. It's one thing to get lost, but to leave behind your money and your beloved guitar? It's almost like he just got called up for a gig somewhere else. A gig he had apparently been writing about for years. 5. In the smoky clubs of 1950s Greenwich Village, Connie Converse was writing songs that were decades ahead of their time. They were deeply personal, complex, and brilliant, but the world just wasn't ready for them. She struggled for years, pouring her soul into her music with almost no recognition. By the early 1970s, depressed and disillusioned, she'd had enough. In 1974, she wrote a series of goodbye letters to her friends and family, explaining that she felt she had to make a fresh start somewhere else. Then she packed her things into her Volkswagen, drove away, and was never seen or heard from again. There was no foul play, no mystery in the traditional sense. It was a quiet, deliberate, and utterly complete erasure of her own existence. leaving only her haunting music behind. 6. The Flannan Isles. Lighthouse stands on a desolate rock in the stormy North Atlantic. In December 1900, it was the setting for a mystery that feels like the start of a horror movie. A passing ship noted the light was out, and when a relief crew arrived, they found an eerie scene. The lighthouse was empty. The three keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur, were gone. A meal of salted mutton was left unfinished on the kitchen table. One of the keepers' oilskin coats was still on its hook, meaning one man went out into a raging storm without it. The lighthouse logs reported days of horrific winds and one of the men weeping. They had vanished from a locked building on an isolated island, leaving behind a chilling tableau of a moment violently interrupted. 7. This story is either a tragic mystery or the most brilliant case of corporate espionage in history. In the 1880s, an eccentric British inventor named William Cantello was working feverishly in a secret workshop to create a weapon that would change warfare, the machine gun. Then, suddenly, he withdrew all his money from the bank and disappeared completely. Just a short time later, an American inventor who had recently arrived in London, Hiram Maxim, unveiled the Maxim gun. It was a revolutionary weapon that made him incredibly rich and famous. The twist? Cantello's own sons were convinced that Hiram Maxim was their missing father, operating under a new identity with his own perfected invention. Did Cantello vanish, or did he simply rebrand himself and sell his world-changing idea as someone else? 8. Amelia Earhart is the undisputed queen of historical disappearances. Her 1937 vanishing over the Pacific is legendary. But while most assume she simply ran out of fuel and crashed, the rabbit hole of alternative theories is far more compelling. The search was massive, yet not one piece of wreckage was ever definitively found. This has led to some wild possibilities. One popular theory is that she was on a spy mission for the US government, was captured by the Japanese, and died in their custody. But the weirdest, and my personal favorite, is the New Jersey housewife theory. This posits that Earhart survived, was secretly repatriated, and lived out her days under the name Irene Bolam. Investigators have even pointed out a striking physical resemblance. The idea of this global icon of adventure quietly tending a garden in suburbia is the ultimate bizarre twist. 9. Judge Joseph Force Crater wasn't just a man who disappeared, he became a verb for it. In 1930s New York, if someone vanished, you'd say they pulled a crater. This Supreme Court justice was a man with connections, deep in the corrupt Tammany Hall political machine. On the night of August 6, 1930, he had dinner with friends, then walked outside, hailed a taxi, and was never seen again. The investigation revealed he'd recently withdrawn a large sum of cash and destroyed several documents, suggesting he was either planning to flee or was being blackmailed. Was he murdered by the mob to silence him? Did he escape the country with a secret lover to start a new life? The case became a national sensation, the Missingest Man in New York. He didn't just go missing. He became a permanent part of the city's slang. 10. When you're an heir to the Rockefeller fortune, one of the wealthiest, most powerful families on the planet, you're not supposed to just vanish. But Michael Rockefeller wasn't interested in boardrooms. He was an anthropologist fascinated by the remote cultures of New Guinea. In 1961, while on an expedition, his catamaran overturned. He told his companion to stay with the wreckage and made the fateful decision to try and swim for the distant shore. He never made it. The official cause of death was drowning, but the region he was trying to reach was home to the Asmat people, a tribe known for practicing headhunting and ritual cannibalism. The grim, unofficial theory that has persisted for decades is that the heir to a vast American dynasty was killed and eaten by tribesmen. It's a chilling collision of two completely different worlds. 11. Imagine being the world's most famous mystery writer and then becoming the central character in your own real-life whodunit. That's exactly what happened to Agatha Christie in 1926. In the midst of a personal crisis over her husband's infidelity, she vanished for 11 days. Her car was found abandoned by a lake, sparking a frantic nationwide search involving thousands of police officers and volunteers, and even fellow mystery writers. The public feared the worst. Then, she was found, perfectly safe, checked into a luxury hotel under the name of her husband's mistress. Her explanation? Complete amnesia. Was it a genuine psychological breakdown brought on by stress? A brilliantly calculated publicity stunt? Or was it the most elaborate passive-aggressive revenge plot ever conceived to publicly humiliate her cheating husband? We'll never know, but it was a real-life Gone Girl decades before the book was written. 12. Some disappearances are just strange. Others are, what on earth was that, strange? The case of U.S. Air Force pilot Felix Moncla in 1953 falls squarely into the second category. During the height of Cold War UFO paranoia, Moncla was scrambled from his base to intercept an unidentified flying object detected on radar over Lake Superior. Ground control operators watched in disbelief as the two radar blips, Moncla's F-89 Scorpion jet and the mysterious object, grew closer and closer. Then, something impossible happened. The two blips merged into one single blip on the screen, which then changed course and flew away at incredible speed. No wreckage of Moncla's plane was ever found. It wasn't just that he vanished while pursuing a UFO. The radar data suggested his plane was quite literally swallowed by it. 13. In 1944, Glenn Miller was arguably the most famous musician in the world. His big band sound was the soundtrack for a generation at war. He was a superstar, the Taylor Swift of his day. As a major in the U.S. Army Air Forces, he was scheduled to fly from England to a newly liberated Paris to prepare for a Christmas concert for the troops. His small, single-engine plane took off into the fog over the English Channel and simply ceased to exist. No distress call, no wreckage, no oil slick, nothing. For a plane to disappear in one of the most heavily trafficked and monitored stretches of air and sea in the world, in the middle of a war, is baffling. Theories range from bad weather to being accidentally hit by Allied bombs being jettisoned, but the complete lack of evidence has made Glenn Miller's disappearance an enduring wartime enigma. 14. Barbara Newhall Follett was a literary prodigy, a true genius who had her first novel published to critical acclaim at the age of 13. But the pressures of early fame and a difficult transition into adulthood took their toll. By age 25, she was unhappily married, working as a secretary, and felt her creative spark had died. In December 1939, after an argument with her husband, she walked out of their apartment with just $30 in her pocket. She was never seen again. The most chilling part of her story is the quietness of it all. Her husband, perhaps tellingly, didn't report her missing for 2 weeks. Did she simply walk away to start a new, anonymous life? Did she take her own life? Or was there a darker, more domestic reason for her disappearance? The brilliant child who had created worlds with words simply vanished from this one. 15. Roald Amundsen was a titan of exploration, a real-life legend who had conquered the most hostile environments on Earth. He was the first man to reach the South Pole and the first to traverse the Northwest Passage. He was, by all accounts, invincible, which makes his end a story of supreme and tragic irony. In 1928, his bitter rival, Italian explorer Umberto Nobile, crashed his airship in the Arctic. Despite his dislike for the man, Amundsen immediately joined the rescue mission. The ultimate survivor took off in a French flying boat to save his competitor and flew directly into oblivion. His plane vanished in the Arctic fog. The man who had mastered the poles disappeared while trying to save another, consumed by the very wilderness he had once claimed as his own. It was a heroic but baffling end for an icon. 16. The final transmission from Australian pilot Frederick Valentich is one of the most chilling recordings in aviation history. In 1978, the 20-year-old was flying his small Cessna plane over the Bass Strait when he radioed air traffic control to report a strange aircraft following him. In a calm but bewildered voice, he described a large, shiny metallic craft with 4 bright green lights, moving at incredible speeds and hovering over him. He told the controller, "It's not an aircraft." His final words were followed by 17 seconds of a bizarre, scraping metallic noise before the transmission abruptly cut out. Valentich and his plane were never seen again. Despite extensive searches, not a single piece of wreckage was found, leaving only his terrifying final broadcast as evidence of his encounter. 17. In 1949 Hollywood, Jean Spangler was a young actress on the verge of a breakthrough. She had small roles in a few films and big dreams, but her life took a dark, mysterious turn. One evening, she told her sister-in-law she was going to meet her ex-husband and then head to a night shoot for a movie. She never returned. 2 days later, her purse was found in a Los Angeles park. Inside was a strange, unfinished note addressed to a Kirk, which read, "Can't wait any longer, going to see Dr. Scott. It will work best this way while Mother is away." The note immediately created a frenzy. Who was Kirk? Was it the actor Kirk Douglas, whom she had recently worked with? Was she seeking a secret illegal abortion from this Dr. Scott? The police investigation hit dead end after dead end. Spangler simply dissolved into the shadows of the very city she had hoped to conquer. 18. To his followers, Wallace D. Fard Muhammad was more than a man. He was considered the incarnation of Allah on earth. As the founder of the Nation of Islam in the 1930s, he built an organization from scratch, blending black nationalism with Islamic teachings and creating a powerful new movement. He was a charismatic but deeply enigmatic figure with a mysterious past and multiple aliases. He held immense power over his followers, including a young Elijah Muhammad. Then, in 1934, after some internal power struggles and run-ins with the law, he simply left. One day he was the central figure of a burgeoning religion, and the next he was gone without a trace. Did he retire to a quiet life? Was he murdered by rivals within his own organization? Or, as some of his followers believed, did he simply ascend back to the heavens? The man who called himself God just vanished from his own creation. 19. Dorothy Arnold was the early 20th century equivalent of a modern heiress and social media influencer, minus the social media. She was a wealthy, educated, and prominent Manhattan socialite from a powerful family. On a winter's day in 1910, she went on a shopping trip on Fifth Avenue. She bought a box of chocolates, chatted with a friend, waved goodbye, and then walked off the face of the earth. Her family, fearing a scandal, initially hired private investigators instead of calling the police, losing crucial time. When the story finally broke, it became a media circus. Theories flew wildly. Was she kidnapped for ransom? Did she elope with a secret lover her family disapproved of? Did she die during a botched abortion, a common and dangerous procedure at the time? Despite a massive years-long search, not a single shred of credible evidence about her fate ever emerged. She simply disappeared into the New York City crowd. 20. Having a geographical landmark named after you is usually a sign of great success. For explorer Henry Hudson, it was a posthumous consolation prize for one of the most brutal disappearances in history. In 1611, after a grueling winter trapped in the ice of a vast Canadian bay, the very bay that would later bear his name, his crew had reached their breaking point. They mutinied. But instead of a quick death, they subjected Hudson, his teenage son, and 7 loyal crew members to a slow, cruel one. They cast them adrift in a small, open boat in the middle of the frigid, ice-choked waters with no food and no hope of survival. They were never seen again. Hudson, the legendary navigator who had charted vast new territories, was left to perish in the middle of his own greatest discovery, a victim of the very men he had led there. 21. The Amazon rainforest is one of the last truly wild places on Earth, a jungle so vast and dense it can easily swallow secrets. And one of its greatest secrets is the fate of Colonel Percy Fawcett. In 1925, this legendary British explorer, a real-life Indiana Jones, ventured into the uncharted jungles of Brazil. He wasn't just exploring, he was obsessed with finding what he called Zed, a supposed lost city of an advanced ancient civilization. Fawcett, his son, and his son's friend marched into the Mato Grosso region, and sent back one final dispatch. Then, complete silence. They were never heard from again. Did they succumb to disease or starvation? Were they killed by an uncontacted tribe? Or, as the romantic legend suggests, did he actually find his lost city of Z and choose to never return? Over the years, dozens of would-be rescuers have also died or disappeared looking for him. 22. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry gave the world The Little Prince, a timeless story about love, loss, and seeing with the heart. But the author's own ending is a story with no final chapter. In 1944, during World War II, Saint-Exupéry was an aging but determined pilot flying reconnaissance missions for the Free French Air Force. On July 31st, he took off from Corsica for a flight over occupied France and never came back. For decades, his disappearance was a complete mystery. Did his plane malfunction? Was he shot down? In 2000, wreckage from his plane was finally discovered on the seabed off the coast of Marseille. The discovery answered where he disappeared, but not how. A former German pilot later came forward claiming he shot down a plane matching the description, but the evidence remains inconclusive. The man who wrote about the stars vanished into the sea. 23. Theodosia Burr Alston was American political royalty. As the brilliant and beloved daughter of Vice President Aaron Burr, she was at the center of power and society. But her life was marked by tragedy, and her end was pure mystery. In 1812, grieving the loss of her young son, she boarded a schooner called the Patriot to sail from South Carolina to New York to visit her father. The ship, along with everyone on board, sailed into oblivion. It never reached its destination. The most logical explanation is that the ship was lost in a storm, but legends immediately took root. Was the ship captured by pirates? Did she survive and end up a captive somewhere? The most bizarre and romantic tale involves a portrait of a beautiful woman found in a boarding house decades later, which the finder claimed was taken from a pirate ship, a portrait believed to be that of the lost Theodosia. 24. Jim Thompson was an American architect and former spy for the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, who single-handedly revived Thailand's silk industry after World War II and became known as the Silk King. He was a larger-than-life character living in a magnificent, self-designed house in Bangkok. In 1967, while on vacation with friends in the Cameron Highlands of Malaysia, he went for a short afternoon walk in the jungle and didn't come back. The ensuing search was one of the largest in Malaysian history, involving hundreds of soldiers, police, and local trackers. But they found absolutely nothing. Not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing. For a man with jungle survival training from his spy days to simply vanish on a well-trodden path is deeply strange. Theories range from a simple accident to kidnapping or a political assassination linked to his shadowy intelligence past. 25. Dr. Dan Elias was a man who seemed more at home in the 19th century. He was a renowned anthropologist, a survival expert, and a real-deal adventurer who chased legends. In 1988, he plunged into the dense jungles of Vietnam on a singular bizarre quest to find the Noi Rung, or forest people, a mythical tribe of ape-like humanoids, basically Vietnam's version of Bigfoot. Elias wasn't some amateur crank. He was a respected academic. He hired local guides, ventured deep into territory that was still littered with unexploded ordnance from the war, and then he just vanished. His guides claimed he walked off alone into the jungle and never came back. Did he fall victim to the harsh environment? Was there foul play involved? Or, in the most wonderfully ironic twist, did the very cryptid he was hunting actually find him? The expert in survival disappeared while searching for a creature that may not even exist. 26. Everett Ruiz was a true romantic, a young artist, poet, and wanderer who burned with a passion for the American wilderness. He was like a character from a Jack London novel, but real. In 1934, at the age of just 20, he rode into the desolate, labyrinthine canyonlands of Utah with his 2 burros and disappeared forever. He wasn't lost in the traditional sense. He seemed to embrace the idea of dissolving into the landscape he loved. He left behind a last known campsite and a mysterious carving on a canyon wall, the word Nemo, which is Latin for nobody. Was it a final poetic statement of his intent to shed his identity and become one with the wild? Did he fall from a cliff? Or was he murdered by cattle rustlers? Whatever his fate, he achieved a strange kind of immortality, becoming the patron saint of all who dream of leaving civilization behind. 27. Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance is the Mount Everest of American unsolved mysteries. As the powerful, combative, and deeply corrupt leader of the Teamsters Union, Hoffa was a man who swam with sharks, both in politics and the mafia. After a stint in prison, he was determined to regain control of his union, a move that made his former mob allies very nervous. On July 30th, 1975, he drove to a restaurant in suburban Detroit for a supposed meeting with two powerful mob figures. He was seen making a call from a payphone, looking agitated, and then he was gone. He and his car vanished. The FBI has spent nearly 50 years and millions of dollars chasing down leads, digging up suburban driveways, and listening to deathbed confessions, but his body has never been found. He likely ended up as part of a concrete foundation somewhere, a permanent monument to the dangers of crossing the mob. 28. Louis Le Prince should be a household name, celebrated alongside Thomas Edison and the Lumiere brothers as a father of cinema. In 1888, he used his own single-lens camera to shoot what are arguably the world's first ever motion pictures. He was on the cusp of unveiling his invention to the world, preparing for a public demonstration in New York that would have cemented his legacy. In September 1890, he boarded a train in Dijon, France, to head to Paris. He was seen entering his private compartment by his brother, but when the train arrived in Paris, he wasn't there. Louis Le Prince, along with his luggage and his revolutionary camera designs, had vanished from a moving train. Did he commit suicide? Was he assassinated by a rival inventor, perhaps someone working for Edison who wanted his technology? It's the ultimate cinematic mystery. The inventor of movies disappeared mid-journey, as if edited out of his own life story. 29. If you've ever read Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, you know the wild, larger-than-life character of Dr. Gonzo. That character was based on a very real person, Oscar Zeta Acosta, a charismatic, hard-partying, and brilliant lawyer and Chicano activist. He was a fiery advocate for his community and a central figure in the counterculture movement. He was also Thompson's partner in many a drug-fueled misadventure. In 1974, Acosta was traveling in Mexico. He called his son and told him he was about to board a boat full of white snow, a likely reference to cocaine. It was the last anyone ever heard from him. Did he overdose? Was he murdered in a drug deal gone wrong? Or was he a political target assassinated for his activism? Like his literary alter ego, he lived on the edge, and one day, he just stepped over it. 30. Bison Deal, formerly known as Brian Williams, was not your typical NBA star. At the peak of his career, after winning a championship with the Chicago Bulls, the eccentric and free-spirited center abruptly retired at age 30 to travel the world. In 2002, he was sailing in the South Pacific on his catamaran with his girlfriend and the ship's captain. Also on board was his estranged older brother, Miles Dabord. At some point on that voyage, a violent confrontation occurred. Dabord later showed up alone in Tahiti, sailing the boat under his brother's name. He claimed Deli and the others had died in a struggle, but his story was riddled with holes. Before he could be fully questioned, Dabord intentionally overdosed on insulin and died, taking the secret of what really happened on that boat to his grave. It's a tragic family drama and a murder mystery with no surviving witnesses. 31. The disappearance of Hale Boggs in 1972 wasn't just a missing person case. It was a constitutional crisis in the making. Boggs was the House Majority Leader, one of the most powerful politicians in the United States. He was flying in a small twin-engine plane from Anchorage to Juneau, Alaska, with a young congressman named Nick Begich. The plane, flying through notoriously treacherous weather, simply vanished. This triggered one of the largest and most desperate search and rescue operations in American history. For over a month, military planes and ships scoured a vast, unforgiving wilderness, but they found absolutely nothing. No emergency signal, no wreckage, no oil slick. The complete absence of any evidence fueled conspiracy theories for years, especially since Boggs had been a controversial member of the Warren Commission that investigated JFK's assassination. Two powerful congressmen just disappeared from the sky. 32. Solomon. Northup's story is one of unimaginable horror and incredible resilience. A free black man and talented violinist from New York, he was kidnapped in 1841, drugged, and sold into slavery in the Deep South. He endured 12 years of brutal bondage before he was finally able to get word to his family and be rescued. A harrowing ordeal he chronicled in his famous memoir, 12 Years a Slave. After regaining his freedom, he became a prominent abolitionist, touring and speaking out against the evils of slavery. And then, sometime after 1857, he disappeared. Records of his life simply stop. Was he kidnapped and re-enslaved, or even murdered as a high-profile target for pro-slavery forces? Or did he, tired of the constant threat, simply choose to live out his life in quiet anonymity? The man who fought so hard to reclaim his identity vanished from the historical record once more. 33. Of all the figures from the ancient world, few capture the imagination like Nefertiti. Her iconic bust makes her one of the most recognizable women in history. As the great royal wife of the heretic, Pharaoh Akhenaten, she was a powerful figure at the center of a radical religious revolution in ancient Egypt. She was depicted in art with a level of authority and prominence rarely afforded to a queen, sometimes even shown in warlike poses usually reserved for a pharaoh. She was, by all accounts, a co-ruler. And then, around the 12th year of her husband's reign, she completely vanishes from all historical records. All mentions of her just stop. Was she exiled? Did she die suddenly from a plague? Or, the most tantalizing theory of all, did she take on a new male identity and briefly rule as a pharaoh herself before Tutankhamun took the throne? Her tomb has never been found, leaving the fate of this legendary queen as one of Egypt's greatest and most enduring mysteries. We've just scratched the surface with 33 of history's most bizarre exits. But history is a labyrinth of unsolved files, and we know there are more out there. So, we're turning the investigation over to you. What's the one chilling disappearance you're screaming at the screen that we missed? Make your case in the comments. If you live for these unsolved mysteries, you know what to do. Hit like and subscribe.